Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Age Group Triathlon Podcast. My name is Simon Olney. I'm a professional triathlon coach, and I've started this podcast for the 99% of triathletes who aren't looking to turn pro, break world records, or spend 20 hours a week training. Now, I'm afraid I don't have an expensive microphone or a fancy jingle, but I hope to use this podcast to share coaching advice and interview athletes just like you, to hear about their experiences racing, understand what makes them tick, and share some real world actionable advice to help you race fast at your next event. In today's show, I speak to one of my athletes, James, about completing his first Ironman in Tenby this September at Ironman Wales. James first came to me all the way back in the spring of 2018 for help preparing for his first Ironman in Port Elizabeth. But pandemics, weddings, house moves, the birth of his first child, and variable motivation levels meant he didn't quite make it to the start line of the first three events that we were working towards together. In our conversation today, we talk about how he went from smoking 30 cigarettes a day to finishing one of the world's toughest Ironman events, making the bike cutoff by 90 seconds, how back of the pack athletes are almost taking part in a different race to those at the front, cycling at 3 a.m, how he'd never finished the event without a turbo trainer, despite training over the summer and telling me how much he hated them, and how he wanted to set an example to his daughter. I deliberately didn't have a debrief with him prior to this call to ensure that the conversation felt organic. But as a result, it's also quite unstructured and random at times, as we go down a number of rabbit holes and answer a few questions out of order. I also trip over my words at one point, recommending a reconditioned wheel on turbo trainer rather than a wheel off turbo trainer. So I just wanted to clear that one up. Anyway, it's more than enough preamble. Let's get stuck into the conversation. Hello, James. How's it going? Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Simon. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Autumn is definitely here. The off season is definitely here. I mean, Ironman Wales is sort of the last race on the UK calendar for most people, intents and purposes. But you smashed it, mate.
It's just, yeah, like I said, I'm not 100% sure it's entirely sunk in just yet.
Yeah,
I mean, I will be wearing my medal for the next 6 months everywhere I go, pinned to
only
my
6 months.
forehead. Literally have it pinned to my forehead. But no, very, very proud.
Yeah, good man. So before we get stuck in, if you can just give us a quick introduction, who you are, how you got here, what your life looks like, because with this podcast, we're trying to look at the age group stories and trying to, present more relatable content. So just share a little bit about yourself.
Of course. So, yes, hi, I'm James. 30, just turned 35. Ironman's been something of a journey for me, you could say. It's been 7 years in the making, and I'm sure we'll go into that in a lot more detail a little bit later. But yeah, I'm very much an age group athlete. You're never going to see world record times from me or anything like that. I'm also a dad of a young baby, lovely daughter. She's a year and 5 months old now. Um, and then obviously in full-time employment elsewhere as well, which takes up a lot of time. So for me, my journey to Ironman has always been secondary to those things, and kind of a journey of how do I fit everything in around what is an incredibly busy life outside of training.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that like as important as Iron Man is, like it should never come before your relationship, before your children. That it should enhance your life. It shouldn't dominate it. And
Yeah,
that's something that I believe. Obviously, you hear a lot of like elite athletes, professional athletes, they may not have children, they may not have a long-term partner, or their partner may do Ironman themselves, who they are fully immersed in the sport, constantly giving everything to it. But if you look at the vast majority of participants, it's a challenge. They want to take on a challenge, but they want it to also to, enhance their life. They want the benefits that come with the exercise, the mental health benefits, the physical benefits. That's really the motivation for a lot of people as much as it is their times or the medal or something like that.
yeah. I think I've always kind of considered it like this, right? Like when you look at someone who's a pro or an elite athlete, 9 times out of 10, it's their job, right? So we have 8, 9, 10, however much you work, hours per day to assign to a job, and you use that to do everything that's associated with that. Um, then again, if you have childcare, or you have a family, friends, these sorts of things, you make time for that, and then it's kind of what's available after that, realistically, that you can then assign to training. I think, whereas if you are in that pro situation, absolutely, you still have friends, family, all of these sorts of things, but you've got that big chunk of time where you can actually go and train properly. You look at an Ironman, especially in the later stages, your rides are 4, 5, 6, 7, sometimes
Yeah.
hours long. And no matter how early you get up in the morning, even if you set out on the bike at 4 in the morning, which I've done a couple of times, try and
Mm.
squeeze them in at a weekend, and you're going out for a 6 hour ride, you're still not back until 10 in the morning, which doesn't sound late, but by that point, your other half's had to get up with the baby
Yep.
and deal with all of these sorts of things. And then you've kind of got to balance all of that. So yeah,
And
it
not
can,
only that, but when you get back at 10 a.m., you're pretty smashed.
but
You
that's
know,
the other,
you've
that's
got
the
you've
other
got
thing.
to have a shower, you've got to make something to eat, and if they then turn around and go, "Oh, I need your help to do something," of course, you're going to help.
Yeah, we've
But
got
there's
Barry and
part of you
Sue's
that's going to
wedding
be,
at,
I just want to lie down.
yeah, you've got Barry and Sue's wedding at 2. Oh God. I've done 100 miles on the bike this morning,
Yeah,
there's been a couple of weekends like that where we've had engagements in the afternoon, and you're there just simply in body,
yeah,
not in spirit.
yeah.
You just
That's
need
why,
to
it's,
have a carby lunch.
I think, as an age group, there's only, you can only sustain that for realistically like a couple of months. That's why we have this build period in the training. You got your base period where it's more about frequency, building up resilience in the body so that when you get to these bigger rides, I'm not going to say you take them completely in your stride, but the body can absorb them,
Mm,
can recover from them.
mm,
That 7 hour ride on the weekend, it doesn't wipe you out until next Thursday.
yeah,
And that's what I've certainly experienced when I haven't been, I'm not saying I'm a fit personally, but at points where I haven't doing as much training and I go out and I do a sportive or something like a hilly 100 miler. And yeah, because I haven't been training as regularly, like it really does it takes good sort of 2 or 3 days to really
yeah.
get. Um,
I always think that's quite fascinating. Like when you look at obviously, when you're approaching a race, you pour over every piece of information you can find
mm,
somewhere, hoping to give you some sort of nugget of information. I remember reading an article, and don't quote me on any of the statistics here, but actually, I think you shared it
mm,
potentially. And it was around what happened to the body when you don't cycle over XYZ period of time.
mm.
And it's
Yeah, I
amazing.
think I shared that one with you
Yeah.
in the group. Yeah.
And it's amazing how quickly the body starts to lose some of the, I suppose, peak fitness that you've put in place.
That top end fitness, that ability to sprint is always the first thing that starts to go. But yeah, like I say, like periods where I haven't done much training, I can still throw my leg over a bike and ride for 100 miles. I've got
Yeah,
that
yeah,
aerobic base. But yeah, the ability to be able to like fly up that hill or the ability to recover, the ability to go deep, that's what suffers when you take that time off.
100%, 100%. And you
But if we
like
just
feel
if
it.
you can, using your own words, obviously, just describe how it is that we prepared between, I think it's February that you got in touch.
February, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
How the training has gone for you, over sort of the last sort of 6, 7 months in preparation.
So it's probably worth taking a slight step back from it. So I decided to do Tenby last September. We were in Tenby. It was the week
Right.
after
Yeah.
Ironman.
Yeah.
Um, and for anybody listening who's been to Tenby around an Ironman, the kind of week leading up to it and the week following it, there's just this electricity in the air in Tenby. It's incredible. Like there's just this energy, and don't get me wrong, people aren't running around going, Ironman. Like you can just feel it in
Mm,
everything. And the signs are still up and all of these sorts of things. And at that point last year, I'd kind of given up on Ironman. And again, I'm sure we'll go into the journey in more detail,
mm,
but at that point, I'd really kind of had my day with it and moved on. And the wife, the baby, and I, who was obviously very young at the time, were sat on this bench overlooking the bay, and we didn't even mention Ironman. Wasn't even brought up in conversation. and I had a lovely time, lovely chat, blah, blah, blah. The next day, got home and it was just sitting in my head. And I was like, why is this back again? And it was like this itch that needed to be scratched. So I pulled my wife and I said, right, can we have a quick chat? And without saying anything, she said, no, you want to do the Ironman, don't you? And I was like, how do you know that? She goes, I could see it in your face yesterday when we were sitting on that bench. And so from there, I decided that right, this one was going to be the one. In the past, I'd kind of always tried to find, easier Ironmans to do, flatter courses, lake swims, these sorts of things. But I thought, right, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do Tenby and I'm going to do it, and it's going to be hard, but I'm going to get the Ironman done. So there was that period probably from September up until when we spoke, where I was starting to poke some training in, trying to do what I could based on the information that I had and the experience that I'd had from previous attempts at doing Ironmans. So things like getting a proper bike fit, that was really important. And then I was basically just running up and down hills. I was
Yeah.
running up and down hills, cycling up and down hills, thinking that was going to be the best thing for me to do because it was such a hilly course. You kind of just think rational brain says that's the best thing
Yeah.
to do. And then it kind of got to this point in February where I was like, right, I've got back up to the point where I can run 10 miles. I can cycle 70, 80K quite happily on hilly courses, whatever. But I'm not getting the impact that I had in the previous times when I worked with yourself, with Simon. Um, and again, you pour over the internet, you pour over training plans. Everybody wants to sell you a training plan for £400 or whatever. And I thought, do you know what? Like, there's no point even bothering with this stuff. I've got to get my man back on board. So that was when I reached out to you. And then, in answer to your question around what has the last 6, 7 months looked like, it's just game changing. I think, in my opinion, the first benefit of having a coach in general that's a human being and not AI or whatever is that level of accountability.
Mm.
Even though, you're not necessarily going to turn up at my house and beat me around the head with a stick.
It was on
It's
the cards at one point, mate.
I know I know in previous attempts there was times, but it's just having that right. Someone's looking at this data. Someone set this. This is an expectation of me for the day.
Mm.
I need to go out and do it. And so there's that. I think the variety is also really important because I think again when we're not working with a coach, we can get very bogged down with right, it's a marathon. I need to go and run a really long distance, or it's 180K on the bike. All I can do is just go out and cycle as far as I can and hope for the best.
Mm.
Um, Whereas actually, with yourself and the knowledge that you've got and the different styles of training, the different sessions really added variety into the weeklies. Um, Flexibility as well. I think, as you know, my job takes me here, there, everywhere, all over Europe. I think we've got about 8 countries this year that I've done a run in.
Yeah.
Um, I think you were calling me Mr. Worldwide at one point because
I
every
was,
time
yeah.
I did a run, it was in a different country. But the reality is that's work, and when you're overseas and stuff like that, you've got to try and fit some sort of training in, and then some of those trips are really last minute. And
Mm.
if you haven't got someone who you can go, hey Simon, look, I've just been called over to Antwerp. Can you sort me out a session for Antwerp? That fits in with that schedule, that's really important versus, oh, I'm here. I'll just go and do a 10K.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd say they were the biggest benefits of working with you. And then also just having someone to chat to about stuff, someone who knows the information, your friends and your family, when you speak to them, it's, oh, you can do this, you've got this, you've worked really hard, but they don't know necessarily, they don't know the stats, they don't know enough about the sport, they don't know the impact it's having on your body, the impact it has on you mentally, all of these sorts of things. And I think certainly in that period between Bolton on what was that, June 30th,
Mm.
and Tenby, you and I have had quite a few hour
Good
and a half
chats. Yeah.
conversations where you've talked me down a couple of times. I think my initial conversation after Bolton was, Simon, I'm going to defer, because I don't know how I can do that twice. And Bolton's not even a hilly course, right? It
Not
was,
anymore. The half,
no,
like,
well, not anymore, no, the
yeah.
half. And so it's that as well. You've been instrumental in that kind of talking down and keeping that focus. And I think at one point you said just turn up. Yeah, just get on the starting line and just turn up. We can always do it again next year if we need to.
Mhm.
Um, and it's those kind of tiny little mindset shifts that really allow you to look at what you're doing and to go, right, okay, all I've got to do is just put my trainers on, go out, do this session. And yeah, here we are. Ironman, Tenby, done. Cheers.
Wear it around your neck.
Wearing it around my neck. Yeah, like I said, I'm not taking it off.
So if we can, one thing I actually wanted to touch on, turbo training.
Turbo training.
When we were working together in London, you had a really, I mean, at the time, it was just sort of the style of the turbo trainers, like the wheel on, relatively cheap turbo trainer you had in your little flat.
Yeah,
And your message to me, no, when we had that first conversation actually, back in February, I asked you if you still had your turbo, and you said, no, I sold it. I hate turbo training.
yeah,
And then that changed.
yeah. I do hate turbo training. And no, I don't hate turbo training. I did hate turbo training. I think, like you say, that there's turbo trainers and there's turbo trainers, right? Like when we were training beforehand, I'd gone out and bought like a 40 quid tax wheel on turbo trainer and fine. But when you've got to do 3 hours on that thing, it's just savage, like you're not using your gear shifters necessarily. It's got its own little weird shifter to have resistance. You're on Zwift and you're racing against something like, well, I could change the gear or I could not, and just keep pinging at this ridiculous speed. And it gives you inaccurate readings and all of these sorts of things. Add to that the fact that it was absolutely shredding my tires. Like, and then you see, oh yeah, but you can get a turbo tire. Well, I'm sorry, but changing a tire on a road bike is one of the most arduous processes on the face of this planet. Like, there's there's a certain respect I have for anyone who does our sport because we almost have the strongest fingertips in history from trying to wedge tires into rims. So the idea of, right, before I train, I'm going to have to take my tire off and put another tire on so it doesn't get shredded. I said, no, it's not for me. So I fell out of love with turbo training very, very, very quickly. Um, and so yeah, like when we had that conversation in February, I said to you, I said, nah, like, I'm not interested in turbo training. Let's do all of the bike sessions outside. I will always go outside. Again, it's not even naivety that I think it's just stupidity, really. Like the reality is that when you're training at this level and at this intensity and this frequency, the idea that yeah, you're going to be able to get your kit on and get out the door for a hour long interval session is great, but the reality is it's just not there. That being, and in addition to that as well, when you've got to do an interval session, it's actually really hard to do an interval session outside. Like you're in the middle of, a high like pace section, and you hit a traffic light. Oh, right, okay, great. Well, that's the end of that one then. You can't necessarily drive those intervals like you need to. So I think it was just after Bolton. I realized that you could pull the Ironman Wales course and ride it on a turbo. And I was like, okay, that's going to be quite helpful. So I think you and I actually did a bit of shopping around and ended up finding like a kicker core
We can
turbo
do.
trainer.
Yeah.
Managed to find some cheeky discount codes, all of these sorts of things, and
Mm.
actually got it relatively inexpensively. And oh my goodness, it changed my world. So, like I say, those interval sessions became 100 times more efficient. Not easier, definitely not easier. More efficient is the word. Um,
Efficiency, are you talking about time efficiency? Are you talking about the execution of the intervals, just all of it?
execution. So, like I say, if you're out on the road and you've got to do 3 minutes at 300 watts or whatever, that's quite hard to achieve.
Yeah.
Um, like I say, in case you slam into a traffic light or there's roadworks that you weren't expecting or something like that.
Safety always has to come first. If
100%.
you're ever thinking about doing any interval training on the road, like it's easy. I remember I did a time trial on the
Mm,
bike, and there's this great bit of road near me. It's about 3 miles long with two roundabouts at each end. And of
yeah,
course they run time trials up there. And I did an event, and I shouldn't have pulled out on the car when I did in the car to slow down. And it was just that race brain in my head that was going push, push, push. And
yeah,
sometimes that logical part of your brain just switches off when you're in the hurt locker and you make poor judgment calls. And so, yeah, I don't necessarily recommend people go out and ride these hard intervals outdoors if they have the chance to do so indoors.
yeah. So I think, from that side of things, it was a lot better. And then I could quite quickly see my fitness and capability on the bike increasing as a result of the efficiency
Mm.
of those sessions, which was really, really good. Um, and then added into that as well, the fact that I used Full Gas, which is, I believe, an Ironman owned company now anyway. But they had the full Ironman Tenby course on there.
Yeah.
So again, working around work and childcare and all of these sorts of things, many a late. I think there's been a couple of times where I've been cycling through until sort of 2, 3 in the morning.
Mm.
Uh, just literally cycling the Ironman Wales course. Because when you look at Ironman Wales's bike course, the first thing you see is 2,500 meters of elevation. And for someone like, if you are a really good cyclist or, you live in a very hilly area, great. Like, and that probably doesn't concern you. I live in Cambridgeshire. It's so flat. So the reality is I don't get the opportunity to go out and do massive hills and stuff like that. So seeing that, really put the fear of God in me. And then all you see a map with a line on it, and it doesn't tell you any further information than that.
Mm.
The reality, they're actually not even very good maps. When you actually then try and
They're,
study,
they're not Ironman need to up their mapping game, I have to say.
they do 100%. And then I was looking at videos on YouTube. You hear about Wiseman's Bridge and you hear about Heartbreak Hill, and for a long time I thought Heartbreak Hill was a completely different hill. I got the hill
Mm.
wrong. But what that allowed me to do was it allowed me to just go and get familiar with the course. Like, don't get me wrong, I didn't remember it off by heart, but I
Yeah.
know that when I get to this stage, I've got a really crap hill approaching me. Right at this stage, I'm going to have to switch into my lower ring because this hill is approaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
All of these tiny little things. But also, when you've completed a lap, you go, okay, right, I've completed a lap. It wasn't as bad as I thought.
Mm.
Obviously, turbo training is not the same as the real thing, and we'll get into the real thing. But yeah, it gave me such a psychological boost knowing
Mm.
that I could do it. Inverted commas there for people who are
Yeah.
just, I could do it. Um, so yeah, there was that, and then lastly, when you're going out on a bike, I don't know how other people do it so frequently. It takes me about 45 minutes to get out the door, like strapping into all my lycra, finding my shoes wherever they've been carried off to, whether they've been tidied up to, helmet, inner tubes, all this sort of business. Then
Mm.
getting your bike. Oh, you're just about to go out. You've forgotten your bottle. Go and get your bottle. All of this sort of stuff takes me
Yeah.
so long to get out the door. Actually, when I go out for a ride, the reality is that the difference between that and then just hopping onto your turbo is game changing.
Mm.
You can get those sessions done so much quicker, so much more efficiently. It goes from I have to try and fit them in before or after work to actually I've got an hour and a bit for lunch. I can
Mm.
hop on the turbo,
Yeah.
get that session done, then it's out of the way. It's not impacting anything. So yeah,
Big
that's
question.
go on.
If we had stuck, because the way that I coach, I don't like to tell somebody you've got to get a turbo trainer.
Mm,
I want to try and work around the scenario people give me and build with the pieces they give me. If you hadn't have got the turbo trainer,
yep,
if you hadn't have done the intervals, if you hadn't have had the experience on the course, and you hadn't fitted in those extra cycle sessions that you managed to fit in due to having the turbo trainer, do you think you made the bike cutoff in Tenby?
definitely not. 100% not.
That's huge.
I don't think I would have made it around the course in Tenby. I
Yeah.
think I would have. I think I would have thrown the towel in.
Mm.
Like there's a picture of me um that came out from all the photographers,
Yeah.
and my face is literally screwed up into a ball. And it
Mm.
was at the start of Heartbreak Hill, and I am just trying to survive at that point.
Yeah.
Like it's gone to literally like neuromuscular like movement of just spin your legs,
Yeah.
like forget the pain, forget the burning sensation in your lungs, forget the fact that you can barely hold on to the handlebars. You were just surviving at that point. And that is that is a level of stamina that I just wouldn't have been able to tap into.
Mm.
100% not.
It's really significant. It's making me kind of rethink my approach almost. Are there certain things that I need to tell athletes? Look, if you want to, that this almost has to happen. You know?
I mean, if anyone's listening to this and at the start of their journey, go and buy a turbo trainer. It doesn't have to be a posh one. Like that's the other thing, right? There's so many on the market,
Mm.
and I think part of the reason I haven't bought one in the past is which one do you buy?
Mm. Good
Just
point.
buy the cheapest one you can. Like the reality is, it's like anything. It's like the difference between, getting Shimano 105 versus Ultegra. Unless you are an elite athlete or a pro athlete or something like that, the actual impact on your performance is going to be so negligible. Like the difference between the Wahoo Kicker Core versus the Kicker Proper is like the level of watts you can put down. I'm never putting down those watts, right? So I am your average man. Like, I am not putting down something. I think it's something like 1200. Like it can handle 1200 watts. I'm not doing 1200 watts, so not a problem. Not a problem for me. And actually, I am probably 30% of the way towards the highest wattage that my kicker core can take. So just get one. And if you get it and it don't work, sell it. They hold real good resale value and go and get another one. Like just get a turbo trainer.
The one caveat I would add, I don't disagree. Go out and get, a cheap one. You don't need to spend $1,000 on a turbo trainer.
No,
But in the year of our Lord 2024, I don't think there's really a place for these wheel-on turbo trainers.
no, no, no.
Get
Let me
one.
caveat. Yeah.
Yeah.
Make sure you have what they call direct drive or smart trainers or whatever they
I
are.
mean, smart train is a term that we used to sort of
Yeah,
determine a turbo train that can change resistance for you. There are very few on the market that don't do that anymore. But
yeah,
yeah, if you get a reconditioned from sort of the manufacturer wheel on turbo trainer, you're only looking at like another like £7,500 compared to the wheel. Sorry, yeah, the wheel off one isn't a lot more expensive than the wheel on one.
100%.
So yeah,
Mine was reconditioned. Mine was a reconditioned
yeah,
kicker core. Just yeah, anything basically one where you have to take your wheel off, attach it to the turbo trainer, and it's smart, so it'll adjust your resistance for you so you can't cheat.
yeah.
Um, just get one. Just get
A lot
one.
of people get the fear about removing the rear wheel, but it's a skill that you need to learn if you're going to be able to ride the course, ride
Yeah,
Ironman anyway. Oh, well, any triathlon, you should be able
yeah.
to take your wheel
Well,
off.
I think it's just general. If you are a cyclist, a triathlete, or anything like that, you should be able to do basic bike maintenance.
Yeah.
And if you get a puncture in your back wheel, what are you going to do? You can't sit there and wait for the bike mechanics. They're very good, but you can't sit there and wait for them because, especially something like Tenby, where add 2 hours onto the time you think it's going to take you to do 180K, right? Because it's savage. And every single, the number of people I spoke to on the course who were like, oh, this is my second time, this is my third time, this is my fifth time, whatever.
Yeah.
And, last time I didn't make the cutoff, because I was stopping to go to the toilet or I was stopping at aid stations and having a chat with the volunteers and all
Mm.
of these sorts of things. Every single second, and again, unless you're like a pro or you're really fit or you're really good at cycling or whatever. But for someone like me, every single second counts. So yeah, just get comfortable with that. For me, it's taking the back wheel off isn't a problem. It's putting it back on. Honestly, I've done it 100 times, and even now, I look at it and I go, right, that's not working.
If anyone's listening, I want a good tip for getting wheels on and off a lot easier. Change down into the smallest cog on your cassette at the back.
Yeah,
If you don't do that, you're in for a world of hurt trying to get it on and off.
yeah. I'll tell you the difference I made as well. Like for a long, long time, I didn't have a bike stand. So every time I took my wheel on and off, I was doing it upside down. So I'd put my bike upside down, the handlebars and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
bike, and then that was kind of how I got used to putting the bike wheel on and off. And then when obviously I was doing so much more cycling, I ended up having to do so much more bike maintenance and cleaning and all of
Mm.
these things. I was like, right, 30 quid from Amazon, you can get a relatively good bike stand. Um, and then when you're trying to put a bike wheel, when you're trying to do the same thing, but you are going from the other direction, then it's a completely different set of situations.
So we talked about the bike a lot there. And
Yeah.
obviously going into an Ironman, the bike is probably the biggest discipline and the one where you had the greatest trouble getting into. But if we just briefly go over the other two disciplines,
Mm-hmm.
swimming, I mean, for me, um, you're a definite like all day swimmer. You can keep
Yeah.
yourself going. We didn't really end up fitting a huge amount of swim training in the end, did we?
No, no. Swimming is so for a bit of context, I used to swim a lot as a kid. So I used to do a lot of like sprint swimming and club swimming and stuff like that. So I think I've always been comfortable in water. And actually, I was having this conversation with someone the other day. I think when it comes to swimming, all of these sessions, and you're going to hate me for saying this, all these different sessions and stuff like that, they're great
Mm.
for improving your form and that sort of thing. But the reality is the swim portion of a triathlon, at, especially at these levels, is so short in comparison to something like the bike
Yeah.
that yes, you could spend your life in a swimming pool, like mastering your stroke, and then shave 10 seconds per 100 meters off of your split times
Mm.
and stuff like that. But if you're not comfortable in water, then you could have the best stroke in the world. You get slightly adverse conditions on the day of your race. And actually, a lot of that work goes straight out the window and you go into survival mode.
Yeah.
And it takes you 20 minutes to get your breathing down enough, your heart rate down enough so that you can get into the flow of actually swimming. Um, and stuff like that. So I think that was my biggest strength there was just that being comfortable in water.
Mm.
Because if you've got that, you can swim all day.
Yeah. And we'll touch on the swim when we get to the race itself.
Yeah,
But
the
I mean,
swim.
from the, working with you over the years, when I saw that, a few of the swimming sessions were getting missed and you had an issue with the lake, being
Yeah,
closed at points and shorter loops, and that, it didn't, obviously it causes a level of like anxiety about it all, but there was no point where I thought, I'm not sure he's going to get around this swim. The cutoff is quite generous with an
yep,
Ironman swim. And we did the maths. And if we looked at your expected swim time, transition time, all of that, we figured that you still had, looking at the calculations with best bike split, you were still looking to be relatively comfortable. I think at the end of it all, you had close to it was under an hour before the bike cut off. But there was no point at which I was sat there watching the numbers come in and going, Jesus, I'm not sure he's going to make it. I could see you slowing on the second lap, but
are you joking? Oh my god, did you not know this? The bike split. I was wildly close to the cutoff on the bike
were
split.
you?
I was about 90 seconds away from being booted out of the race.
I must have got my maths really wrong then. Or actually,
Yeah,
it could have been the way the Ironman
the
app.
tracker is terrible.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
But
Wow.
no, literally, I got into transition from the bike, and the guy, one of the marshals there, grabbed me and he was like, "Right, rack your bike now." I was like, "Just come off the bike." I couldn't remember where my bike went, and like you have all these paths,
Yeah,
and you're like, "Right, my bike's there." Blah blah blah.
yeah,
You've done that prep, but when you've done that in the rain and the cold and everything,
yeah.
and you're exhausted, I couldn't remember where it went. And then he was like, right, run over there, run that way. That's the quickest way. And I had decided to change between each of the disciplines.
Yeah.
And so I had to grab my bags, grab whatever nutrition I could, change as best as I could, like, and then just run out of transition. Because I thought the cutoff was once you'd got into transition. He was like, no, 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 you have to get out of transition. So I was like, oh my God, panicking, running. And yeah, I think it was something ridiculous, like 90 seconds before the
I
cutoff.
think you've got 10 minutes to get through because the bike course closes and then there's like a 10-minute buffer for transition and then transition closes.
Yeah,
So
because if you look at the actual transition time for the second transition, it's like wildly short in comparison to the first
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you made it and that's
There you
important.
go.
Run training.
Run
Again,
training.
like I've always known you as being, I think when we were doing the maths about the cutoffs, again, look, if you get off the bike, I know you have the stubbornness in you,
Yeah.
be able to run, walk, crawl around 26.2 miles. And we still got some pretty decent runs in.
Yeah.
Definitely like 2.5 hours, I think, was our longest
Yeah.
one. Uh,
Yeah.
we got some intervals in. We definitely got some hills in. I remember
Yeah.
you saying, "Oh, I want to get these hill sessions in because I want to be able to run up the hills in Tenby."
Mhm.
And me saying, "Look, not being funny, mate. You
Yeah.
need to walk them. Even if you can run them, you probably need to walk them. Like, given that the fatigue that you're going to be experiencing,
Yeah.
but once you get off that bike." It's just about getting those miles in the legs. Yeah, some interval work as well, but just building up the resilience in the muscles, to hopefully prevent you from cramping or from it all going wrong sort of on the marathon itself. But anything else you want to add about the run there, or should we start to move on to the day itself?
Yeah. I mean, I would just say in terms of running, I think again, that's just probably a culmination of the 7 years that this has
Yeah,
been a journey,
yeah,
right? It's like, yes, we did 2.5 hour runs during this 6 month period, but I do have, I have in the past done 30, 35, I've done marathons, these sorts
yeah,
of things. And again, similar to when we were talking about the swimming and that being comfortable, I think it's almost that psychological notion of, I know my body can do it.
yeah.
It's just literally a case of just putting that one foot in front of the other at that stage. It just becomes a neuromuscular relationship and you've kind of left the building.
Yeah, yeah. It's just put your body into autopilot, limp home mode.
Yeah, yeah,
Just,
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
don't stop moving.
Exactly that.
So if we fast forward to the race weekend,
Yep.
you know, you traveled down on the Wednesday, I think, wasn't it? Or the Tuesday?
So because of baby, we left late on the Tuesday night, so after her bedtime, so we could travel kind of while she was asleep. So
Mm.
yeah, late Tuesday. So Wednesday morning we arrived in. Well, sorry. So yeah, Wednesday morning was kind of my first real time
Yeah.
in Wales.
And how were you feeling at that point? Were you thinking the training's done, the hay's in the barn, like I'm feeling pretty reasonable about where I am right now? What were your feelings when you first saw North Bay, when you realize this is happening?
I was all over the place, to be honest. It was a real difficult couple of days. Like I think because I think part of me in the back of my mind thought that it wasn't going to happen this year. And that, as I mentioned earlier on, it was really just a case of turning up, turn up, do the best you can. And if you don't do it, you've still tried. Like that's amazing in itself.
Mm.
Um, and you can always do it again next year. Um, so there was an element of that. I think I'm quite used to the Ironman format, having done a few of the 70.3s over the years. And so that took a lot of the stress out of things like registration and racking and all of that sort of stuff, because that can, Bolton, for example, that even Bolton in June, that was quite stressful because it was two separate transitions over different sides of town, hideous traffic, all of that sort of stuff. And when you've got that playing on your mind, that can stress you out quite a lot. I drove the course. I'm not sure whether that was a good idea or not.
Really?
Yeah. Um, because again, I kind of had buoyed myself up with that turbo work that I'd been doing of doing the course. But again, like there's for anyone listening, there is a big difference between turboing a course and seeing a course in real life. Hills look a lot flatter on a screen than they do in reality. And when you are on a turbo and you can sit up and take on a gel whilst you're scaling a massive hill because you don't have to worry about balancing your bike, all of these sorts of things. Um, yeah, so that kind of got into my head a little bit.
But if
And
you
I,
hadn't have done that as a counterpoint, if you
yeah,
hadn't have gone out and ridden that, driven the course, is there a chance you could have maybe been a bit overconfident going into the bike and maybe burned a few too many matches on that first lap and got into more trouble on the second lap?
potentially, although I was incredibly conservative on the bike. And I think that's one of the things that led to the flirting with the cutoff to the extent that I did. Because I think that first lap I was really crystal cranking, like
Yeah.
thinking I've got all of this to come. And don't get me wrong, you need to do that if you are doing Wales and you are not.
If you can just share your finishing time with us right now so people can
Oh
get an
yeah.
idea of.
Finish time, I think it was like 16 hours, 8 minutes or something like that. Um, so yeah, again, it's not the sexiest of times, but it was. I always said to everybody who ever asked, like, how, like, it's one of those questions like, what time do you want to do the Ironman in? And I've always said 16 hours, 59 minutes, because for me, it's always been that idea of I want to complete an Ironman because of what it meant to me. So yeah, like I say, it wasn't a super fast time, but for me, great. For Wales, great. Um, yeah.
That kind of the mindset of somebody who is looking to make the cutoff and
Mm-hmm.
that's their main goal. That mindset is very different to someone who wants to come in around 11, 12 hours. Because if you're looking to do the bike in about 6 hours, that's very different to somebody looking to do the bike in closer to 8 hours. The intensity has to be that much lower if you know that you're going to be flirting with the cutoffs because
Yeah.
you're going to be on the bike for 2 hours longer.
Yeah.
It's like it's an elastic band, you know?
Yeah.
Obviously the more that you stretch it, the more it can take, sort of the more tension. If you're going to be out there for longer, you can't afford to stretch that elastic band so long, you
Yeah.
know. So professionals, they're going to be out riding the Ironman course at maybe sort of 300 watts, just pulling, number out the air, whereas you would go around there in closer to like sort of 120, 150,
Yeah.
because you're going to be out there for that much longer.
Yeah. And like I say, I think a big part of that was, especially the first lap out through angle and stuff like that, was really trying to maintain as much energy as I could, really focus on nutrition. And actually, the first section was lovely. I had a really, really good time. A lot of camaraderie,
Mm.
all of these sorts of things. Then the second portion of the first lap, for people that know the route, was a little bit darker. It gets a lot quieter. There's less support, and it's a little bit more lonely. And it's very, very hilly. Um, that that was tough. But then when you get back into Tenby and realize you then have to go and do that again, that was when you really had to dig deep. But the reason I say that I was potentially a little bit conservative on that first portion was because actually I was sticking down a lot more power on that second lap, thinking, Christ, I need to move here if I'm going to
Right.
hit this cutoff.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and actually, yes, it was challenging. And yes, like I said, there were moments where that face was screwed up and you're really digging deep. But I was running with it. So what that suggests to me is that actually I probably could have been quite a bit harder throughout the rest of the course as well.
Interesting.
Yeah. But, again, when that's your ambition to just finish,
Mm.
doesn't matter if I'd have gone out harder and finished in 15 hours or 14 hours or whatever, I wouldn't be sat here in any different emotional state than I am right now.
Yeah. No,
So yeah, it's all
it's
good.
at the end of the day, your finish time only really matters to you.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people struggle with the concept of when they first start. But the reality is, if somebody comes in and says, I did an Ironman in 14 hours, I did an Ironman in 15 hours, most people just can be amazed they did an Ironman. You know,
Yeah.
it's if it's important to you, I fully support that. If you want to go to the world, obviously your finishing time becomes that bit more important. But yeah, it's a personal journey, an Ironman.
It 100% is. And like, well, like, do you want me to just run through why I was doing it?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Because I think it's quite good to give a bit of context. So, I mean, context wise, like this has been such a huge journey for me. Like, I was, it all started in 2017, so 7 years ago. I was in Port Elizabeth in South Africa, and they were setting up for the Ironman in Port Elizabeth. And at the time, I was in quite a strange headspace. I was kind of changing careers, felt a bit lost, kind of getting towards my mid to late 20s, well, late 20s actually. And, kind of didn't, like, life wasn't panning out as I planned it, and all of these sorts of things. And I was like smoking 20, 30 cigarettes a day, drinking, going out with the boys a lot, these sorts of things. I was gymming, I was going to the gym 3, 4, 5 times a week. I could lift enormous amounts of weight off the floor, but there was nothing functional about that. Um, like, when in real life am I going to have to go and deadlift that amount of weight? Don't be wrong, strength is important, but not to that extent. Um, and they had the banners up as you were driving down to Port Elizabeth Beach, and it was like swim, 3.8K, cycle 180K, run 42.2. I said to my friend at the time, I'd never, ever, ever be able to do that. Like, that's just madness. Same way that everybody who's listening to this will relate to is, if somebody hears that you're doing an Ironman and they ask you about it, they'll say, oh, I could never do that. I was that guy. And then that was kind of that moment in time where, like I say, I felt very lost in my life. I needed something to focus on, and Ironman became that focus for me. So I went home, ran to the end of the street, thought I was going to die. Next day, ran to the end of the street, felt a little less like I was going to die, and so on and so forth. You chip away, you chip away, you chip away, you chip away. So that was 2017. By 2018, I did the London Marathon. The trajectory was supposed to be London Marathon 2018, 2 half Ironmans in 2018, then return to Port Elizabeth in 2019 and do the Ironman. So I did the 2 half Ironmans in 2018. Happy days. And then 2019, South Africa just didn't happen. And for various reasons, we had, family problems, personal issues, we had house moves, all of these sorts of things. So it was moved to 2020. Then, as everybody knows, 2020 was the year of COVID. And then that kind of lingered for a couple of years. And it was at that point that I decided to give up on Ironman. I was like, do you know what? I can't be bothered to carry on with this. It's too much impact on my life. I can't maintain this level of fitness, etc., etc., etc. And then yeah, it came to the bench in Tenby last year, and everything was reignited again.
Mm. I think I'm partly responsible for Port Elizabeth falling through, actually,
Oh yeah,
because I was out there for the World Championships,
right.
and I told you that there were guys who were there on Shark Watch.
It didn't help.
And I
Didn't
didn't
help.
realize that that was something that was very much at the forefront of your mind anyway. And I remember you saying, I wish you hadn't told me that, mate.
Yeah, like ignorance is bliss in that. And I said earlier on about being comfortable in water and all of these sorts of things. But if there's one thing that being like doing so much open water swimming has given me more fear of the sea. Is
Really?
yeah, the stronger swimmer I am, the more scared of the sea I am, because it just makes you realize that if the sea decides it's not your day, it's not your day. Like,
You learn to respect that. Obviously, we talked through the bike. We're now talking about the swimming. So if we could just go back to the start of the day, okay,
yeah,
of Ironman Wales.
yeah,
You're there in your wetsuit,
yeah,
your Ironman Wales cap, blaring out the Welsh national anthem.
Yep.
Are you hyped? Are you getting the goosebumps? Are you thinking, I'm going to do this? Are you thinking, I can't do this? Before you get into that water, what's your mood?
So I think even at this stage, I'm still in that mindset of just do as best as you can,
Yeah.
right? Do as well as you can. When you see the sea, well, when I saw the sea on that morning, and you look at the current along the back, the longest straight of the swim, you think, Christ, that's that's going to be a lot of fun. That one. Um, I don't tend to get nervous at these points.
Mm.
I get focused. I think like I'm very, 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 very bad socially, like 24 hours out from something like this. Like if someone tries to have a conversation with me, I struggle to hold a conversation because I'm so focused on something. And at that point, I was also desperate for the toilet as well. I remember that. But yeah, I mean, it is goosebumps. That start in Tenby is like nothing else. You know, the fireworks, the flames, the music, the thousands and thousands of spectators that literally just line the walls. Um, and it was also really, really impressive how quickly they got everybody in the water. So you think start, they kind of set everyone off. You think, right, okay, I've got about 15 minutes here. And before you know it, you're thrown into the sea like, oh my God, I'm going.
Mm.
Um, and then, yeah, the swim itself, like we said, was just a bit of a battle.
So talk us through the conditions.
So the conditions, it was choppy. It was certainly choppy. And I think the chop was one thing, but more than anything, it was quite tidal. So what you found was, again, if you look at the map of the route, it was like a big triangle. It was a 1.9K triangle. Then you get out, you do the Aussie exit, run down the beach, around a big rock, and then you're back in the water again. And we'll call, Pythagoras theorem, A, B, C of the triangle for each leg, right? So leg A as you're swimming out, it was all right, but you did have the tide kind of coming at you at a diagonal. So you were getting battered around quite a lot. And I don't breathe both sides, I breathe on one side. And it's because of like sore neck and various reasons. But so that's fine, unless the tide is splashing water into your mouth every time you go and try and breathe. So that was quite challenging, but it was fine. You just kind of slog your way through it, and then you get to the buoy and you turn around. The reality is that back straight, like I said, you've got the chop, but the tide, oh my goodness. Like, I think you looked at the splits, right? And it was something like 3.5 minutes.
So yeah, I know normally like you in open water, I can expect to see you swim about like
Two and a half.
210, 210 per
Yeah.
100 is kind of like your standard like
Mm.
everyday like all day pace that you can hold.
Yeah.
But you were closer to 3.5, 4 minutes at
Yeah.
some points on that back straight. Now, GPS watch, obviously you have to take it all with a big pinch of salt. But yeah, you only need to look at the actual lapse time
Yeah.
between those to know like, oh, he was battling.
Yeah. And literally, like, I said to someone on the bike, like everybody I spoke to at Tenby, like, yes, the bike was hard. Yes, the run was hard, but it was the swim. The swim is the thing that bonded us. I think I heard that 200 people either didn't finish the swim or got pulled out,
Yeah.
which is bonkers. But yeah, that back straight, you've literally got the tide pulling you in the opposite direction. So it's like you're swimming on a treadmill. It's also super choppy. So at points you kind of come out of the water like a dolphin and then like splash back in. The RNLI, bless them, amazing. I absolutely love the RNLI. A big boat going up and down the back straight. So every now and again you just get the wake of that come and just
Yeah.
like slap you in the face as well. But it's a trade-off, right? Because then once you've got around that long section B, we'll call it, that long section, you then get into the fast section, section C, the route home for that lap at least.
You're doing about 120, 130
Yeah,
per 100 at that point.
yeah, I felt like Michael Phelps. I literally had the world behind me. It was great. So I'm just zooming back into the beach, and before you know it, you're there. But the one thing I will mention is the landmines of jellyfish that were in the sea. There was a lovely bloom of jellyfish in the sea for the swim, um, which I saw one on my first lap. And there was a part of me that was like, oh, I don't know if I can get in for the second lap here. But I did, and it was fine. I didn't see another one. But I heard stories of a couple of people getting stung. But
Ah,
yeah,
it's not nice.
no, not nice. Not nice.
But yeah, and then you did the full kit change, which I don't think is a terrible idea. I did that for my first Ironman because I knew that I was going to be on the bike for so long because I did Bolton back in 2019, 2,500 meters elevation. I didn't get the training in that I should have done. I just wanted to like tick off the first one. And yeah, I was like, if I'm going to be on the bike for sort of 8.5 hours, I need to be comfy. I can't be there on that tiny little chamois. But yeah, in a tri-suit, on all those hills and everything. So do you think the full kit change was the right idea?
If I was to give advice to anyone, it'd be full kit change.
Really?
Yeah, because for all the reasons you've just mentioned, comfort, pocket size,
Yeah.
like the amount of pockets you have in a cycling jersey compared to, or sorry, the depth of the pockets you have in a cycling jersey compared to a tri suit is game changing in terms of carrying your nutrition and everything you need. Um, and then also on a day like that where it was not cold, but it was erring towards cold, you're wet,
Mm.
it's been a really hard swim. You then had to run through Tenby, all of these sorts of things. Getting into something that is just fresh and clean and warm, the psychological benefit of that to me meant that I had a smile on my face going out on the bike.
Mm.
It didn't feel like a chore, right? I was fresh, I was ready, I had all my gear on. It's what I, with the best will in the world, how often do people go and do their long rides in a tri suit? Rarely, right? So you were in comfortable territory, you knew everything, where everything was, and all of that sort of good stuff. So yeah, I felt $1 million going out on the bike. So I would always, unless you are, like I say, want to shave 2-3 minutes off in transition, which for some people is incredibly important.
Mm.
But for me, it just didn't matter enough.
Did you have to queue for the changing room?
No.
No. I know that is the issue that some people have, is that they can be very busy and be stood there with their kit bags queuing up to go in and
Yeah.
change. So it can in some cases add up to sort of like 10 minutes on. Yeah, if somebody's aiming to like get under 12, then they're not going to be in the bike for nearly as long. They can probably get away with a tries. But yeah, if you are flirting with the cutoffs, then the benefit from like being in comfort may well offset the time that you lose in transition. So that's interesting insight. So moving on to the run then.
Yep.
Where did you like obviously I know that you had to rush through transition to make the cutoffs. Where was your head at when you start putting one foot in front of the other and thought, right, marathon? Did you feel it was almost in the bag? Did you feel you had one hand on the medal? Or did you still think there's a lot that can go wrong here?
I backed myself at this stage. I was like, this might actually, like I say, my mindset had always been just do what you can.
Mm.
Do what you can, do what you can. And obviously that rush through transition was incredibly stressful. And when I was out on the course, I grabbed the guy. I said, "Does this mean the cut-off's done now? Like, I don't have to worry about it." Like he goes, "Yeah, yeah, you've got plenty of time. Like, just take your time, get the run done, and you're done." And I was like, "Wow, okay, this might actually happen today." And it was at that point that it was literally at that point. Up until that point, I was probably still in that mindset of, I don't think I'm actually going to complete this today, but I'll do my best and see where I end up. But it was at that point, that conversation, I was like, bloody hell, like I might actually finish this and get a medal today. This is going to be incredible. Um, and so, yeah, again, dry socks, dry shoes, big game changer. I normally use transition again because I'm not out there to be a superhero necessarily. I normally use transition to kind of get my breath back and get some fuel on and what have you. But obviously, with that Russian transition, I hadn't had that opportunity. So I actually started off with a little walk. I started off and just took 5 minutes just to walk and just recalibrate, re-engage different sets of muscles. I was eating a flapjack, I think, at the time, which obviously isn't great when you're running. So I was eating a flapjack, having a drink, all of these sorts of things, just kind of getting my head in the game. And then you and I had discussed at length what the race plan was going to be. I quite like running up hills because I'm a weirdo. So kind of wanted to run up that hill. You told me don't run up that hill, walk up that hill and run down that hill. So I did stick to Simon's advice. I thought, what I don't want to do is get this far and then blow up and lap 3 or 4. So I ran through Tenby and then walked up that endless hill, endless. But it was kind of at my level, right? The people that were around me at that time, people who were at similar times to me, that was kind of the agreed race plan anyway. So most people were walking up the hill. And yeah, I think people have a love-hate relationship with laps. I don't necessarily like them in the swim. But on a run, I find them, especially a long run like that, I find them to be quite nice and quite helpful because a marathon, like I compared it to London Marathon, right? Actually. So London Marathon obviously is one big loop. And you might get those moments where you feel quite tired and you think, oh God, I'm only here. I've got so far to go. Whereas when you're doing loops, you're kind of ticking each of those loops off in your head, and actually getting to the end of a loop is a nice psychological boost, and it's 10K, but thereabouts. So, most people, if you're listening to this or you're doing an Ironman or something like that, 10K should not be something you're particularly concerned about doing. So breaking it down into those 4 10K chunks actually at that stage made everything feel so much more achievable. And like I say, sticking to the race plan, not deviating from it, just kind of putting one foot in front of the other. And kind of what the walking up the hill meant was it meant that I had the legs so that, I could run through Tenby where all the support was, everybody's had a few beers by this point. It's really raucous. Some Ironmans come 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. Most people have gone home and you are, kind of running with the last few people clapping or ringing a cowbell or whatever. But these guys were there in force, and being able to just run through Tenby meant walking up that hill was absolutely fine for me.
So it was the right call to walk up the hill then.
It was entirely the right call to walk
There we
up.
go. I was a
Yeah,
little bit worried then when you explained that, but no, I'm glad that I mean, it's energy efficiency really. You look at ultra runners, they never really run up hills; they always hike up them. So you use a lot of energy. I mean, you would have seen people who are running up the hill who you may have even passed whilst like striding up the hill.
yeah.
You know?
Well, I was hitting good splits on the way down, right? So that was the thing. Is I could have run the entire thing at like 7 minutes a kilometer or
Hmm.
something, right? And yes, you run the whole thing, but then I was walking up the hill. When I say walking, I wasn't dawdling.
Yeah, yeah.
I was really pushing myself and walking as hard and as fast as I can. I think it was about 8 minutes a kilometer I was walking at.
Yeah.
Um, but then on the run down, you're hitting times of like 5:20 a kilometer,
Hmm.
you know, which for me is quite a fast pace. So the offset of the two of them meant that actually it
Yeah.
didn't impact the overall performance very much at all, really.
Because you could run to the top of that hill and save maybe like a minute, but then if your legs are shot, you can't then run down the downhill and you can't run on the flat.
Also, you get to lap 3 or 4, you best will in the world, you have the best nutrition strategy in the world. But at the end of the day, when your body says no, it says no.
Yeah.
And do
So,
you want to get to that stage where you've swum the most hideous 3.8K you've ever swum, you've cycled the toughest 180K you've ever cycled, and then out of I don't know, arrogance, whatever it is, you thought, oh, I want to run this whole thing, and then you blow up on lap 3 and you can't continue, or you injure yourself or something like that. Is it worth it? No.
so how did you break down the 4 laps in your head? Obviously, I know I've got my own method, but how did you like what label did you give each lap?
I didn't necessarily give each lap a label. It was more kind of landmarks. So I knew that, out of transition, it was relatively downhill to the bottom of the hill. So run that bit. And then I'd give myself a certain amount of time to walk up the hill. First lap was survival. Second lap was kind of getting in the flow. Third lap was how quickly can I do this?
Mm.
Fourth lap was just you're running on adrenaline because you know that it's your final lap. You know that one, and really the battle is getting to the top of that hill in Tenby.
Mm.
Like once you've got your fourth band in Tenby, something would have to go drastically wrong for you to
Yeah.
not finish. So it's almost like the finish line is at the top of that hill on lap four. So get there, and then to be brutally honest, like I I conserved. I ran down the hill, but then I conserved quite a bit of energy um, going through Tenby on that final lap, knowing that I wanted to run across the line. You know, I wanted to finish strong.
Yeah. I mean, the way that I break, Ironman marathons down, first lap, you're finding your legs, you're learning the course, what the course looks like, what each bit looks like. Second lap, I'm telling myself, when I finish this, I'm going to be halfway.
Yeah,
And it's like
yeah,
that's the carrot. You're going, that's what I want to achieve. Third lap is always going to suck.
yeah,
Because you at that point, you've got so much fatigue. There is nothing that I can do in training to replicate the feeling of the second half of an Ironman marathon with an athlete. It's simply about building the resilience, building that, that muscular endurance, building that aerobic system, and just hoping that they're going to be able to hold on. So that third lap is normally the darkest one for most people. Fourth lap, hopefully, is a bit of a victory lap,
yeah.
where you're thinking, this is it. I only need to, this is the last time I go up this hill. This is the last time I pass the finish line. This is the last time that I do this. And that really kind of mentally helps spur you on.
100%, 100%. And like I say, for me, the real finish, well, not the real finish line, but the kind of mental finish line I had was getting that fourth band. So when I'd pick that one up, it was almost just like that elation. It meant kind of almost that when I got to the finish line, I'd kind of almost run through the emotions,
Mm.
of finishing because I'd had that moment up on the hill on my own, which was quite nice. Um, but and also like I think one of the key one of the key things that I think is important to remember is that when you're an age grouper who isn't super fit like me, and you're doing it for the similar reasons to why I'm doing it, you're trying to balance your training with a ridiculous work-life balance and these sorts of things,
Yeah.
is that you are doing an entirely different race to other people on that course.
Yeah.
If you are, like we said at the start of this conversation, someone for whom this is their job, their zone two is going to be entirely different to your zone two, right? So when you look at that, and then those folks are out on the course, I think the finisher was 9 hours something, the first finisher for
Yeah.
Tenby this year. So 9 hours something.
There was no pro race this year, so
There
that's
was
an
no
option.
pro race, yeah. So the fastest age group was 9 hours something. Um, that's 9 hours of exercise. For someone like me, it's 16 hours
Mm.
of exercise.
Yeah.
So I actually think you're running in you're having an entirely different experience. Like, don't get me wrong, 9 hours of exercise is still very hard, and at the
Yeah.
levels that those folks do it, wow.
Yeah.
But again, they're built differently to me at this stage. They have a much better cardiovascular system. They have much better VO2 maxes. They are much stronger in the legs. Like all of these sorts of things. So, but the difference is then when you are trying to manage yourself for 16 hours of movement, 16 hours, it's unbelievable, and I absolutely respect and take my hat off to anybody who gets around in, 7, 8, 9 hours, sub 12, whatever that is. But I also have just absolute mad respect for some of the folks that I was out on the course with. We were in dark places at times, but it was that camaraderie that got us through. And like I say, 16, 17 hours is just huge levels for any human body to endure.
It's a weird relationship, isn't it? Because the more hours that somebody puts in training, the less they spend on the course.
Yeah.
So, of course, the training for them is going to be harder, it's going to be more brutal, but the race itself is going to be easier than somebody who wasn't able to get as much training in for whatever reason
Yeah.
and is then out there for a horrendous amount of time.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it really is, pushing like as far as like 1 day events go, it's pretty hard to beat the Ironman distance triathlon
Yeah.
for that real test of endurance. No, it's good insight. So wanted to wrap up very quickly. I wanted to go over obviously you had this year, you achieved it. You did it, achieved, smashed it. But you first came to me April 2018 and you wanted to do two 70.3s. So we did Edinburgh and we did Weymouth.
Yep.
Now, between this isn't me calling you out here, but this is kind of an insight for any listeners. So you completed the 70.3 Weymouth between April when you started with me and the 1st of July race day. How many hours training do you think you did?
Oh, I don't know. I've got no idea.
26.
26 hours
26 hours
between April and July.
between April and July.
Okay.
Now, the reason you still got it done
Hmm.
is because of that level of resilience that you had. And also the fact that you don't necessarily need to be as fit to finish a 70.3 as some people may think.
Yeah.
Of course, yes, you had done marathons in the past. You were broadly a pretty fit guy. You could swim well. You could cycle. You averaged 22 kilometers an hour on the bike at Edinburgh. That's not far off what you did in Tenby this year.
Yeah.
So yeah, you were able to achieve what is, let's face it, a great achievement of finishing a 70.3 on not an enormous amount of training. So if you just want to turn up and do triathlon as a hobby for fitness, that you don't need to pile as many hours of training. I mean, some people they think 26 hours, that's a week's training.
Yeah.
People are training for Ironman at the highest level. But the fact that you're able to sort of to just lean on that general like resilience that you had and that base fitness, it just goes to show that it's not simply a sport for the elite, for the fittest people, that you can still get around these courses, you can still enjoy these kind of distances without sort of selling your life at the river. Of course, Ironman is a very different kettle of fish.
Is it though?
I mean, I think, oh, go on. I mean, because you were saying at the start, that obviously it placed uh, bit of pressure on your home life and
I
your
think,
work life. Like,
I mean, look, like, I think you need to be wired in a certain way, right? You need to be wired in a certain way to do anything like this. If you're somebody who, you know, doesn't seek challenges out, and if something gets a bit hard, you decide it's not for you, it's probably not going to happen, right? And that's at any level of the sport. But I think the reality is something like an Ironman. It's 50% fitness, 50% mental. Like I say, you have to have that tenacity and that stubbornness in your character to not, when you are going up at the 90th hill you've done
mm,
and your body is screaming at you to not stop,
yeah,
basically. So I think, don't get me wrong, you can't just, well, some people probably can just roll up and just get one done.
mm,
They're just naturally very fit people. And again, you're always going to have it. You can have people who are just naturally a lot fitter than others. I'm not the fittest person in the world. I could do a lot more training and probably become a lot more fit. But the reality is as long as you're comfortable in those disciplines, for me, a big part of it was the psychological stuff. So in training, knowing I could do 180K on the bike, knowing I could run a marathon, knowing I could swim 3.8K, even if it was in a pool, knowing those things and then having that stamina to keep pushing, I think is the biggest thing for me.
So Port Elizabeth didn't happen. In hindsight, looking back at that, was everything else going in your life, like that just wasn't going to happen.
Hmm.
Yeah. And then we had Estonia was on the cards.
Yeah.
So this was 2020, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's 2020. And
Because
then
you tried to defer your place from Port Elizabeth, but you could only defer it to you couldn't defer it to a European race.
no, and we've missed one. So I think Port Elizabeth, I just downright didn't do. I just
Yeah.
cancelled. I don't know. I don't think I even booked that one in the end. What I
Okay.
did do, and you did advise me against this, was I booked New Zealand.
That's right.
I booked New Zealand because again, I was like, I'll go and do one that's like a life experience race.
Yeah.
So I booked New Zealand. You said, James, I don't think that's a great idea, what with COVID going on and all of these sorts of things. So I booked it anyway, and it alas didn't happen. And then when I was trying to transfer the race, I couldn't do anything outside of Oceania. So that was a challenge. So then I booked Estonia because at that stage it was COVID, and most of the races from 2020 had been cancelled in Europe. So they were pretty much all sold out in 2021. And the only race that worked for me that year, because we also had a lot of commitments like weddings that had been cancelled in 2020. We had 9 weddings that year. The only one that was still available was Estonia. And it was lovely because it was nice and flat and a lake swim and all that sort of stuff. And then I deferred that a year to 2022. And then that was when I fell out of love with it and decided not to do it.
So looking back at um your training back when we had sort of Estonia in our sights, it was going pretty well until obviously your wedding, which is a higher priority, and then things started to, it obviously started to fall off a little bit there. But if you look back at, because there were periods when we were working together where you didn't really do anything for sort of 3 weeks
Oh, yeah.
on a stretch. And you said in our phone call during February that the mindset at the time was, well, I've missed one workout, I might as well miss two.
Mm,
And now I've missed three. Well, let's just get going again on the weekend. And the weekend comes and you've got a weekend full of things. And before you know it, that whole week has sort of slipped through your fingers.
yeah.
So that was at a time when you had less going on in your life.
Yeah.
Yet now here you are, wife, kids, busy job,
Hmm.
you got the medal around your neck.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? What happened?
You ever heard the saying, if you want something done, give it to a busy person?
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of that. I think I think after the it was all a trajectory thing, right? So had Port Elizabeth happened in 2018, I think, fine, I probably could have muscled through that. But then when I was chasing it during COVID, it just wasn't my priority anymore. And there'd be, I wouldn't train for a bit and then we'd stop working together or whatever. And then I would have this, laying in bed thinking, I'm going to do an Ironman. Right. I'm going to speak to Simon tomorrow. I'll get Simon back on board. There'd be 6 weeks of amazing training and then it would all fall off a cliff again.
Mm.
Um, and I think the difference between that period and where we were was I'd given up. I'd stopped, I'd put it to bed. And then it was that kind of almost crystallizing moment of sitting on that bench in Tenby, seeing it and thinking, right, this is an itch that needs to be scratched. It was that very personal journey of I couldn't run a bath, let alone a 5K back in 2017. And I'd told myself that I was going to get it done. And I'm the type of person that, if I set myself a challenge, I will go and get it done by hook or by crook. It's not going to be the best or the sexiest way of doing it, but it will get done. And I felt like I'd just not achieved. Having a baby helped, like when you have a baby, everything you do is not for yourself anymore, it's for them. Um, and I really want my daughter to grow up knowing that her dad will go and get these things done. He's the type of person that will do that. I want her to grow up in an environment that's very active, very fit, very outdoorsy because, children copy what their parents do
Mm.
essentially. So there's myriad different reasons. Um, yeah, that's probably the main why it was so different this time. And I think if I was giving one piece of advice, one thing I've learned is, well, maybe two, right? So number one, when you start working with Simon, he will set you all your training on Training Peaks, and he is quite flexible, so if you do need to move things around, you can. But the moment you move that first workout, you've opened a very, very particular door. You have then taken the control from Simon to yourself, and you then have to rely on yourself to make sure that training gets done that week. Whereas if you look at it from the mindset of, right, this is the training I need to do today, and you make sure you get it done, that, in my opinion, is better. And then, there will be some days where life gets in the way and you can't get that session done, just don't get it done. But the moment you start trying to take control of the calendar, I ended up, not so much this time around, but in the past, with
Mm.
about 17 sessions all lumped into one weekend, thinking I was fine. I didn't do that swim, I'll do a swim, then a bike, then a run. You're doing yourself a little 70.3 on a Saturday and a Sunday because you haven't done the sessions during the week,
Yeah.
because you can't hold yourself as accountable. Um, but then to my point about, if you can't get it done, don't get it done. Never miss 2 days in a row. Like, if you miss 2 days in a row, once off is a bugger. I missed my training session today, but it's not the end of the world. I've got to run
It
tomorrow.
happens. There's no way that everyone can nail every training session.
100%. But if you can avoid it, 2 sessions is a massive, massive fulcrum. Like getting back on the horse.
Hmm.
There's a period you can see in my Training Peaks actually, where I think it was March time. I was doing really, 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 really well, and you can see my fitness increasing. And then we had a trip to Southwold, and it was quite challenging to get training in. So I couldn't, and it was 2 or 3 days, and I'd gone from being really, really energized and really diligent and really hitting all of those numbers perfectly, and then it fell off a cliff, and then I just couldn't get the motivation back for like a week, 10 days,
Hmm.
and that had a massive impact. I wonder what this finish time would have looked like had that not have happened, and I'd continued on that trajectory and that adherence to the training that had been set to me. Because yes, it takes a week to start training again, but then it takes a week of that to get to the same level of adherence and these sorts of things.
So you fell off the wagon back in March. What helped you get back on the wagon?
I think it was doing anything you can. So just start moving again. So it might be that I'd look at the training and, being brutally honest, you set the training and there might be periods at that point, because I've kind of mentally stepped down from it, and like I say, it was challenging getting back onto the horse. I knew I just needed to start moving, because if I go out, stick my trainers on and go and run, whatever that run looks like, it then gives me the endorphins or whatever it does. That means that the next day I'm like, right, okay, I need to go and train again. And so what I always found was, whatever that session looked like, just get out and do something. And then if you do something, you then get that momentum back behind you, and you go, right, okay, cool. Now we're back in the game. What Simon said, like, how do I adhere to that again? And it's just almost, you've got to start that motor moving again.
Mm. Something's always better than nothing. That's what I try to tell people.
Yeah.
Is that if somebody looks at their calendar, because there's often issues where you go for a swim and the pool's closed. I think that happened to you. Oh no, you forgot your goggles and the shop was shut.
Yeah.
And what you did is you went home and you did a run instead.
Yeah.
Well, it would have been really easy for you to roll over and said, well, I guess it's just not happening today.
Yeah.
But instead, you said, is it on the program? No, but I'm going to do something. And that is such an important thing to maintain that momentum, to maintain that motivation, to set yourself up well. That's really important. So, have you got any tips for anyone taking on Ironman Wales about the course, about the event? If someone's listened to this who's just signed up for Tenby next year,
Yeah.
what
I mean,
would you say?
all my tips would be focused on people who are in my position, right? So Ironman isn't your life. Ironman is something that's very personal to you. It's not necessarily the focus of your family and stuff like that. You are fitting in training as and when you can, and you're not going out there to get it done in 10, 12 hours. You're going out there to finish, and my tips would probably be as follow. Like, number one, it's Wales. It's going to be windy. The weather is unpredictable. Train in every single type of environment you can. If it's raining outside and you've got a run scheduled, suck it up, go out and run. Get comfortable doing all of these things without music as well, because you don't have music or headphones or anything on the course. As I mentioned before, get comfortable in each of the environments. Know how to retrieve a bottle from a rear bottle cage if you've got one. Know how to do basic bike maintenance. Know how to look after yourself. Get comfortable in water. Swim in every different environment you can. My family take the mick out of me because whenever there's open water near me, even if I'm not going for a swim, I'll go and get in it. Like, if it's a lake, I'll go and jump in it. If it's the sea on Christmas Day, I'll go and get in it, whatever, because it's cold, it's not very nice. But the more comfortable you can become in it, the less things are going to upset you when you're actually doing the swim. And if it is conditions like we had this year, that is the only way I got round. It had nothing to do with the swimming or the fitness or
Yeah,
anything like
yeah.
that. It was psychological, being comfortable in the water. The hills are tough. Everybody talks about Wiseman's Bridge and Heartbreak Hill when it comes to Wales, but get familiar with the course because there are a few other ones that will really beat you up. So there's one out the back of Freshwater West as you do the loop to angle. That's quite punchy. There's also a hill into a town called Narberth. Just get familiar with that because that comes and smacks you in the face quite quickly. Um, Walk up the hill if you're running, run down the hill. And yeah. Oh, my other tip would be as well, nutrition. Nail your nutrition because it's a long old day. And if you are 6 weeks out from your race and you're not confident in your race nutrition plan, get comfortable as soon as possible and make sure you go out and do some long sessions adhering to that plan, because you are going to need to be so religious to it on that race. There's times where you can't think of anything worse than pouring a gel down your throat. But if you don't, it's not going to happen.
How did
So
that go in the end? Because I know that you were planning to take a lot more gels on the bike than I kind of recommended. And we mixed up the fuel sources on the bike a little bit to help your stomach be able to stomach the gels better on the run course. How did that all pan out?
yeah, I think I'm quite fortunate in the fact that, with the exception of the one event, which we will not discuss here, that happened a few weeks ago,
Yeah.
um, I've got a very, very tolerant GI system.
Mm.
So I can tolerate a lot of gels. I did move to the SIS beta fuels because they have a higher carb density.
Yeah.
So it meant, just by that nature, less gels. Um, I know I just told everyone about the race plan. I did not stick to it. I did end up relying heavier on gels in the end.
Mhm.
Um, but that was again me because I knew that my stomach could take it, especially after that. After an hour or two, I knew that my stomach would be comfortable
Yeah.
pouring more gels down. So I did end up relying a little bit heavier on gels than
Mhm.
we had originally planned.
I
But
mean, if it works, it works. I just wanted to avoid you getting to the point,
yeah,
lap three of the run, where you just go, like, if I see another gel, I'm going to chunder.
of course, of course. But I kind of basically went out on the ride with a plan A and a plan B. Plan A was the one that you and I had drawn up together. It was centered around gels and blocks and drink and stuff like that, which for most people I would say do that. Um, but actually, because I was pouring in 500 ml of water, 500 ml of electrolytes every hour, I didn't really have the foresight or the capacity to be drinking 500 ml of carbs.
Yeah.
Um, and for those people out there saying, yeah, but you get electrolytes in your carb drink, you do, but not enough. And I'm quite a heavy, like a salty sweater, so I needed to get more electrolytes in. So I ended up, just in terms of keeping myself regular, because what I didn't want to do is miss any of my deadlines to get carbs into my body. That was the most important thing to me. I ended up just taking a few extra gels on the bike. I also had extra gels in my special needs bags,
Mhm.
just in case. Oh, that's another tip. Put a sausage roll in your personal needs bag. Oh my God. That was just the best thing in the world. Yeah. But yeah, so I ended up just relying quite heavily on gels, but that was just, I know my body and I knew what I could
If it
take.
works for you,
Yeah.
then yeah, that's
Yeah.
absolutely fine. Great. Thank you so much. I got one last question for you before we let you go.
Go on then.
Very generous with your time. How much have I changed over as a coach since 2018?
How much have you changed as a coach? I think you've changed quite dramatically, actually. I was thinking about this the other day. I think we were both babies when we started. I
I mean,
remember when,
I'd been coaching for a couple of years by the time I
yeah,
started working with you.
yeah, but we were both quite young. We were younger men, Simon. And now we're
We
both
were,
looking.
we were.
Now we've both got much more facial hair and much more hair on our heads. We look a little bit more old and haggard. But I think when we first started out, but I don't know if this is necessarily how much you've changed compared to how much we've changed. You know, our
Yeah,
relationship, learned
yeah,
how to train me and stuff like that, when to put the iron fist in, when to ease back a little bit, when, as I mentioned earlier on, when I need to be talked off a ledge and you
yeah.
need to dedicate an hour to me on the phone. Um, but I think it's that lack of, well, it's not a lack of change, but it's your consistency that I think is the most valuable to you. It's meant that we can have a relationship whereby, yeah, so I know that we can work together, we can not work together, and there's always going to be that level of consistency in terms of the training, which has been game changing for me. Um, yeah, and I just think your approaches, your methods, things like you've created a bit of community around what we do this time around. You know, you've really doubled down on that. Things like the long videos that you send just to give people extra advice outside of just the coaching, all of these sorts of things. Yeah, it's been great. It's been an amazing journey.
It has, mate. Right. I've taken up far too much of your time, but thank you for your insights. And hopefully, I'll be working with you in the near future on your next little adventure, even if it doesn't involve the word Ironman.
Yeah, absolutely. But shh, don't tell the wife.
All right, mate. Take care of yourself, right?
Right.
Speak to you soon.
Bye.
Thanks once again to James for his time. I really hope you found the conversation insightful if you're planning on tackling your first Ironman. Something we didn't touch on in the conversation itself is that he believes part of the reason for his motivation levels being variable in the past was he always chose flat, easy races that there's a part of him that just didn't really think he needed to train for as much. By signing up for Ironman Wales, he knew he had his work cut out and that the fear of the bike course is what really whipped him into action. If you're interested in working with me to help you achieve your triathlon goals, get in touch via the methods in the show notes. Thank you for listening. I really hope you found the episode useful and interesting. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. If you'd like to come on the podcast and share your triathlon story, send an email to the address in the show notes. We'll organise a conversation, see if we can work something out. Until next time, good luck with your training and stay safe.